This time we're going to talk about selecting, which is a fundamental feature of any editor. You're probably already familiar with selecting, so you may think this is a fairly simple topic, and it is. But there are a few things that are not obvious. Many commands in HexEdit make use of the selection. For example, if you do a search, the found bytes are automatically selected. You should become familiar with the advanced selection options to get the most out of HexEdit. You probably know how to select a block of bytes using the mouse or keyboard. Just click and drag with the mouse, or hold down Shift while using the cursor keys. There are a large number of cursor movement keys which extend the selection if you hold down the Shift key. For example, just as Control Home takes you to the start of file, Control plus Shift Home selects everything from the current position to the start of file. Control plus Shift End selects everything to the end of file. HexEdit, like most Windows programs, allows you to select everything just by pressing Control plus A. You might also have noticed that as you are making a selection, a small yellow tip window appears. This shows the length of the selection in either hex or decimal, depending on how addresses are currently displayed. So if I change to decimal addresses, it's shown in decimal. If I change to hex addresses, it's shown in hex. You can turn off this tip window if you want to in the workspace display page of the options dialog. There's also an option here to show some extra information about the selection length. That is, what power of 2 the selection length is exactly divisible by. For example, if the length is an odd value, then this will just show 1. 1, 2, 4, etc. This is very useful information, as some commands and operations that work on the selection have requirements about the length of the selection. For example, some encryption algorithms work on blocks of 64 bits at a time. In this case, the selection length must be at least a multiple of 8. Remember that you can show the tip window at any time simply by holding down the Shift key. There are several features that you should be aware of if you need to make large selections. First, if you try to select past the edge of the screen, then HexEdit will automatically scroll the screen for you. This is called auto scroll in many programs. If you're selecting with the mouse, then the further you drag the mouse past the edge of the screen, then the faster the scrolling becomes. This is called auto scroll acceleration. You can actually adjust the auto scroll acceleration using the options dialog. If you drag the slider to the right, you increase the rate of acceleration. If you drag it all the way to the left, then you get constant speed. If you need to make a large selection, then even with fast auto scroll, it can take a long time. A better way is to click the start of the selection, then use the scroll bar to scroll to the other end, then use Shift click. Another nice feature is that, like everything in HexEdit, selections are undoable. So if you carefully make a selection, then accidentally click on the window and lose your selection, then you can easily use undo to get it back again. Another way to make a selection is to use the extend to mark command. This is useful if you want to enter the exact start and end address using the calculator or jump tool. For example, say I want to make a selection that starts at 1000 hex. I can use the calculator to move to that address. Actually, I can click the Mark Set button to set the address. And I want the selection to go to 4000 hex. I move the current cursor position using the calculator. Now I can select everything from the mark to the current cursor position using this command. Actually, this is also useful in huge files where the scroll bar becomes pretty much useless, because if you have a file that's hundreds of gigabytes in size, then a tiny adjustment in the scroll bar can actually move hundreds of megabytes. but I'll talk a bit about editing and working with large files in a later video. Now, as I mentioned before, there are a very large number of commands and operations that use the selection. If you find a menu item disabled, it may be because there is no selection. Some operations are even more picky, requiring the selection to be a certain length. For example, if you want to add the value 5 to all the double word values of the selection, then the selection needs to be a multiple of 4. Finally, here are a few more tips. First, if you double click the address area, then this will select a single line, which is useful if the line length has been set to a fixed record length. Actually, the double click commands can be changed in the Customize dialog, but by default it selects the current line. Another convenience is that right-clicking on the selection brings up the selection context menu. Again, you can configure this menu in the Customize dialog by adding new commands. Probably the most common use of the selection is for copying and cutting to the clipboard. There are also commands for writing and appending to a file on the Edit menu. All these things will be discussed in later videos on editing.